All right, good afternoon. I'm with Sranan Gold, with Rayiez and Oscar, who are in Canada meeting with investors. So let's start with Oscar. Tell us about your travels to Canada and what your objectives are there.
Yeah, morning, Robert. Yeah, it's what is it? 9 o'clock in the morning here. The objective is very simple. We flew over to Toronto last week to meet with our institutional backers and also some of the retail guys that have backed us. Currently in Vancouver, doing exactly the same. Just a twice yearly update, face to face, and a coffee. So I'm basically telling everyone what we've been doing. We've drilled over 5.5 or close to 6,000 meters actually over the last couple of months. Started drilling again in the second week of January, now down in hole 27. So yeah, moving along quite nicely, and face-to-face meetings are obviously better than videos. So that's why we're here, meeting our institutional and retail backers.
Very good. Yeah, that's good to hear. It's important to have FaceTime with investors and management teams. Look, the company has been busy, and you recently, just last week, made the announcement of a new property acquisition. Tell us about this new property and why you decided to acquire it.
We were approached a couple of months ago by the group that is behind that project. It's well located alongside the Central Guiana Shear Zone, and bang in the middle between Founders and Miata. And as Rayiez will go through in a bit, it is very well located. Lots of artisanal mining going on. The groups that have been mining there have been there for many years, and we got some very decent samples, or sorry, grades back of the exposed shear zone that we found. So it had to be done.
Yes. We the Lawantino concession, Robert, is to the southwest of the Central Guiana Shear Zone, and the shear zone itself is not mineralized. It's a large-scale structure that cuts across all the Guianas, but you want to be proximal to that. The Antino fields are northeast of the Central Guiana Shear Zone. We are southwest, and to the farthest northwest, you have Sela Creek. This shear zone, when it cuts through the greenstone belt, it helps to further deform and enrich some of these already existing gold prospects. So which is why it is favorable to be proximal to this Central Guiana Shear Zone. We've been to the field, we've talked to the miners there, and we've known that, that area had seen artisanal mining in the drainages for decades. You can see that because there were a lot of older tools found by recent miners. We've mapped and sampled some shear zones between granites and basalts, which tells you there's an orogenic system there. We did a deep penetrating radar survey, which tells us that there's a high density of structures focused in the same area that mining has been focused on by these artisanal miners. And also we can apparently see the Central Guiana Shear Zone cut through, which kind of confirms that it's a late reactivated strike slip dextral fault zone that influences gold mineralization all along where this dissects the greenstone belts in southeastern Suriname. So except the deal and that we were approached by the owners, it is a great land package to have.
So I know some shareholders will say, well, hold on, you already have a large property footprint. Why are you acquiring more when there's still more targets to test on what you already have?
Yeah. Location of this project. That's a simple answer.
So you're adjacent to Antino, and so this could be, an extension of Antino?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it might very well be. And of course, there's enough to do at Randy. There's enough to do at Poeketi. We were hoping to have had the excavator on site already to start drilling at Poeketi, but the low water levels in the rivers make it still difficult to get the excavator over. All the other stuff is on site. The drills there, the rods, the all the consumables, everything's there. We're just waiting for the excavator. And meanwhile, we've increased the meterage at Randy from the initial 5,000 we were planning to do an extra 5,500. Sorry, approximately another 5,000 meters at Randy, bringing that up to 10,000 meters in total. So yeah, there's enough to do at Poeketi, enough to do at Randy still, plus the other targets. But I do think, and as a team, we thought that Lawantino made a lot of sense, and that's why we took it.
Okay. So is there anything planned at the, Lawantino property?
Yeah, I'll let Rayiez go through that.
Yes, we have, follow-up mapping and recon will happen. The deep penetrating radar survey we just did helps us to focus our sampling, soil sampling or mapping in certain areas, so we can prioritize. And just referring back to your question, I want to refer that Sranan's approach to add something else to our portfolio is also because the Lawa fields are some of the oldest and most mineralized gold systems that were known since the olden days in Suriname. And the Assay Creek, which these small scale miners refer to, is it's a branch of the Lawa River that cuts through and goes all the way into the Lawantino concession, where a lot of gold has been mined through the decades. So to have another one added to our portfolio at an earlier stage that we could simultaneously develop and work our way around in the next few months to develop additional drill targets, I think is a positive thing to do, as a longer term view to grow Sranan.
I think a no-brainer sort of question that I think investors probably are going to ask is, hold on, this is next to Founders. Why didn't they get this?
That group wanted some exposure in a company, some equity exposure, and the other offers they might have received from other parties didn't include any equity. So, and of course, yeah, they might have spoken with Founders or Miata or maybe a new group that is trying to get into the country, but yeah, they chose our little outfit to work together with. So great.
Okay, very good. Yeah, they chose you. That's the answer. They chose Sranan.
Yeah.
So Ron Halas. So this is a big name, a new board member for the company.
Yeah.
How did you get introduced to Ron? And tell us about that.
Ron contacted us a little while ago. Ron, with his Suriname history, being part of Vine Gold, having lived in Suriname for many years. What was it? Summer, June last year, we had a chat through LinkedIn. And then more recently, we started talking about him helping out and becoming part of the team. We met with Ron yesterday for lunch and talked about some ideas and other thingies that might be happening in Suriname soon. And I do believe that with his Iron Gold history, but also the other involvement that he's got with various other companies in Canada and also relationships with institutions and banks, that is going to be very helpful for us.
Very good. Okay, so let's talk about Randy's pit and how much have you drilled there? How many holes are we awaiting assays for? And what have you learned so far at Randy's?
So Robert, we've last year we ended the year by drilling 4,200 meters almost. And for the first 2 weeks in January, we drilled an additional 1,000 meters. And right now we're close to 5.5. We have done a lot of structural work where we've used some lineation measurements to kind of tell us how our high-grade ore bodies are behaving, how the geometry is, why they plunge that way. And this is basically kind of summarizes, that's Randy's pit down there, 150-meter pit that we know initially of, did some sampling, some high-grade grabs. That's the trenches that we did early last year, 5 meters at 36.7. Hole 4, and then we hugged around hole 4. Then you had hole 6 with the wide intercepts, hole 11, and we're continuing to the north, and we've planned some holes to the south. So additionally, in the end of January, beginning of February, we had added 2,500 meters of extra drilling. Then we finished some trenches to the far north where we have 82 meters at half gram per ton. So, trenches included, Randy's pit included, and the drilling, we know of a shear corridor that is well beyond 4 times the distance of Randy's, which is almost 800 meters or beyond, of this mineralized mylonite with fault-filled veins, which we are planning more drilling in. So this has grown, after that 2.5, an additional 5,000 meters we're planning to do here to follow up on these high-grade ore shoots. And all of this is excluding the originally planned 5,000 meters that we wanted to allocate to the Poeketi, which is on the other side of the river. So much more drilling we would like to do. So that's why we're talking to people now. But basically, not only just show that there is high-grade gold mineralization, but we're trying to build some volume here. And there is the geological thinking, the structural work steers that thinking, steers that planning. And we see a really complex shear zone that has high potential.
Okay, so how many holes are still pending?
Oh, at the lab right now we're drilling hole 27. We've received up to hole 23. So there is 24, 23 holes at the lab. 4 holes are about to be released next week.
This week.
This week.
This week.
Yeah,
This week, hopefully.
we're already in the next week. Yes.
Okay, very good. And so you've already drilled to the north, and now you're going to step to the south?
No, we're drilling, we've did bigger step outs in the north now. But we might come and do some infills in certain areas and then, go to the south. And, this was just the initial 2,500, but there was much more dots to be added. Those to kind of follow up on these high-grade ore shoots within the shear zone.
Okay. On slide 10 in the November presentation, there's Randy's, there's the new pit, and then there's the Poeketi target. Tell us about the new pit target.
Yeah, I'll pull up that one, this one. Okay. New pit, and this is the Poeketi pits. They're part of the 1K system of high grade at surface mining of the smoky quartz veins with visible gold during the gold rush. We've sampled at the new pit since the start, 3 grams, 1 grammers. The main shear zone is underwater, so we can't access that. But the extensions of it at the Poeketi pits, that's where we had the 108 gram, the 80 gram grab sample, the 25 and 26 grab samples in the north. Some minor mining going on with these shafts around here. So it's part of a larger system. This is that 5,000 that it was referring to that we had initially planned since we've raised the money last year. So the potential is there. We did some channel samples with some grade 2, but it's an additional system on the other side of the river with a slightly different orientation, but similar host rock, similar alteration, similar sulfide content, and similar smoky quartz veins that show recrystallization and polyphase, basically deposition of gold.
Okay, very good. So are you deploying a second rig soon?
Yes, we are still working on Randy. We're waiting for the excavator to be shipped down to site. So the current water levels in the river system are a bit too low to accommodate a pontoon with 40 tons of metal to be shipped to site. So a bit more rain, and we'll ship it over and fire up the drill.
So the second drill rig will go to the Poeketi target?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that'll start there.
And so that's probably going to be March?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We had some decent rain.
Yeah, you have your holes planned out there? I mean,
yes.
are you ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Rayiez, tell us about the Poeketi target and what you find interesting there.
The Poeketi target is basically some really highly shared basalts, some interlayered sediments in there too. There's some cross-cutting felsic dikes which are a bit older than the deformation, which we've also sampled some of the veins in. which are not too mineralized, but the big mineralization comes from, this shear zone and this fault fill vein, which these miners, they mine in these underground shafts, which, they can be wide, 5 to 15 meters wide. There's many of these pocketed pits. The Poeketi pits were discovered during the COVID times when there was a gold rush. There were 4,000 people wandering around, crushing all these gray blocks of quartz veins with a lot of visible gold. So I think it's a part of the same system as Randy's. It's a bit more extensional, so it's more open space. And of course, these orogenic gold systems are a bit complex and their shape changes. So it's a similar shear zone. It's a bit more west northwest striking, dipping towards the west. This is why most of the drill holes are a bit different. The orientation is a bit different than at Randy's. So we're drilling towards the northeast to hit that properly. So we've taken a lot of structural measurements from our surface mapping around there. This is basically a 5,000 meter wish list. So we might, once we see something, change a little bit of the spacing, which we are flexible with. When you have an excavator here, it only takes a day or two to make a new drill pad. But really, good, strong shear system within basalts, and just like other projects such as late stage pyrite is often associated to these really sheared zones where you have visible gold, and excellent ground prep from all the deformation. And it is open to the northwest to Rob. A next 2-3K extension is highly probable. That's why we have people in the field right now sampling around all these steeper hills, old mining pits, and within the alluvial valleys to try and see and extend that in the meanwhile. I think while we will be drilling this too, we will also do some additional trenches to the north just to keep going.
And so to be clear, at Poeketi, there has been artisanal mining here, but it's never been drilled before?
It's never been drilled before, no.
Okay.
And even our sampling, we had to rely, because whatever was highly mineralized was mined out. So it's either in the tailings or under a big pound of water, and it's actually the shafts from the miners that allowed us to go down there and grab some of these high grade grab samples, and in some of these pit walls that they forgot about, where we channel and have some good grade. Especially in the new pit, it is really hard to get to the ore. So we have 3 specs there of high grade grab samples that we managed to get ourselves. But it is, currently still being mined by, a handful, 5-6 people, with all these 20-meter shafts. Okay. So they're only limited by the technology that they have at hand to be able to mine that, right?
And how deep will you drill there at first? Like 150 meters?
Most holes are 150 meters planned. There's some that are a bit longer, 200 meters, but that's the max depth that we've currently planned. Unless while drilling we see something exciting, of course we can't stop then. And these drills are designed to go to a maximum depth of 500 meters.
Okay.
If needed.
And then, so let's talk about the Treasury. How's the Treasury look right now, and what kind of plans does the company have for 2026?
As of January, mid-January, the Treasury looks good, looks well. We do have to make some property payments coming year, especially on the back of the Lawantino acquisition. We obviously have to start spending some money there. The additional holes or the additional meters we're doing at Randy is going to eat up a bit more money. But yeah, we're in a good situation still.
And some shareholders have been a little bit shocked by the downtrend in the share price. I mean, obviously the gold price environment is generally pretty strong. What are your comments on the Sranan share price?
Yeah, well, we're just as disappointed as any other shareholder is. I don't know where it comes from. We're sitting on a system. We're drilling it. We keep announcing that this system is growing. As Rayiez mentioned earlier, we've got about 800 to 900 meters of mineralization now. On the back of the additional holes, we'll be well over a kilometer of mineralization. Every time we release something, a lot of anonymous selling, and the institutions that we met in Toronto last week and our meeting now in Vancouver are still there. So it's not the majors or not the institutions selling. And we do have a lot of support, as I said, from institutions in Toronto and Vancouver. We do have a lot of following from Vancouver retail, but also Toronto retail, Germany, Holland, Belgium. It's not them selling. I don't know where it comes from. We do have a market maker who sends us the sheets every afternoon. Bits and bobs are being sold, but especially on the back of a news release, there is someone showing, vast volume at the offer, and that's not very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like, for example, January 13th, you announced the 11 meters of 7.33 grams per ton gold in hole 11 and a few other holes as well. I mean, your hit rate is consistent at Randy's, and
absolutely, yeah.
The share price sold off.
Yeah, that was I think 707,000 in terms of volume came from one seller, and we know who holds that stock, or the custodian, but yeah, we don't know who's behind it. And again, so far, including the group that has helped us finance this from the outset, they're still in there. They're still supporting it. I don't think we've done anything to show the market that we're not advancing this project.
Rayiez, tell us about hole 11 and what it intersected, and what that hole tells you.
I think hole 11 is part of the same shoot that we had the hits in hole 4. It just plunges to the northwest a bit. So and every time we have these intercepts with wider with stronger hits, is because within the myelinite zone you have a little bit more of you have really compressive domains, but also extensional domains, and much more sulfide mineralization associated to that. And while that's why we also did the trenching to the north, because these ore shoots, when they're plunging north, some of these continuations you will need to do a really long hole and step back to get to that. But if there's subsequent development of other ore shoots that are probably also popping up closer to surface, that's what we're trying to find with those additional planned holes. So same thing in hole 7 was really shared and altered basalts with some extensional smoky veins, dismembered veins, with a lot of late pyrite that is also smeared within the fabric. And we're consistently seeing that intensity of ductile brittle deformation that intensifies the grade and what we see in hole 7. And with the planned trenches and extended shallower holes to the north, we're planning to probably intersect another zone like that. And once you can stack 3 or 4 zones like the ones that hole 4, 6, and 7 11 have intercepted, that's where we're starting to build some serious strike length. And that's the intent, because they're plunging northwest.
Okay, very good. So you're starting to build some tonnage there at Randy's pit.
Yeah, also driven by the understanding of the geology and the intensity of deformation that we're observing, and also our structural measurements that show us, what that movement on the fault is, and we can project the geometry and the behavior of these high-grade ore shoots, and that builds the strategy for the next drilling. And then again, it's also economics, because some of these, are you going to try and do a deeper hole that costs more, takes more time, or are you going to try and find something that's easier to drill with the footage that we still have in hand, or the cash that we have in hand, to be able to do this and develop that?
So the myelinite shear zone cuts through both the saprolite and the mafic volcanics, but the gold tends to be hosted in the volcanics.
Yeah, the saprolite is basically just rotten rock, basically. So the myelinite, whatever is saprolite now used to be just basalt rock. It's just weathered in the humid tropics. But yeah, the myelinite exists basically as the fluid pathway, and it's these jogs or extensions where you have vein formation, or where if there's a brittle host rock in there, which we try to find if there's any felsics that would host more of these veins, which there's some small indications of dismembered ones, but it's just these veining and these extensional domains within that myelinite. And the myelinite itself, it's not one planar thing. It's a couple of, it's a corridor, basically. That's why we have mineralization in the footwall and in the hanging wall. Important, it dips to the west. Delineation shows us that it's an oblique dextral movement towards the northeast. So the western block is moving up and left in comparison to the eastern block. And your probable ore shoots will plunge towards the northwest along those plains, and that's what we're trying to target. So imagine this cigar looking lenses that we're trying to find, and if they plunge down, you have to play around with your drilling and the footage that you can afford to try and hit that while building strike length.
So Rayiez, the company announced 4 drill holes from the Randy's Pit trend at the Tapanahony Gold Project in Suriname this morning. Can you tell us about the results?
Yes, Robert. So we've drilled, one of the holes which was at the southern extension, or the southern edge of the Randy's Pit. Hole 20 was drilled in between a gap that we could not drill last year. And then what we did is some scissor holes along the section with hole 13 to see if we are picking up something in the saprolite or shallower in the drill hole. And then we also have a steeper hole on where hole 12 was to follow these plunging ore shoots. So, and what we've seen is that, we have, for example, to the north on hole 22, we have a 5 meters at 2.24 grams per ton. So it does plunge. It's not as wide as we'd like it to be. Hole 22 also has 10 meters at, almost 1 gram per ton. Hole 23, which was the longer scissor hole, have multiple hits. We have, wider intercepts calculated at 0.6, but part of those, we have a 3-meter zone of 3.7. And just at the extension, so the southern end, we have 4 meters of 6.5 grams per ton. That's at the southern edge of the Randy's Pit, actually. So we're having these zones which can have really high grades, and not everywhere we've hit it as wide as we would like it to be. But they are broad intervals. The shear fabric and the alteration that we've intercepted can be very wide. The distribution of grade within there is a bit more narrow, but we continuously see, the shear system within these holes. So we're progressing north now, where we've done the 82-meter trench at 0.5 gram. We're drilling hole 26 and 27 now, where we've intercepted the shears 3 times in hole 26. So that's almost 100 meters step out from where hole 23 is. 22 actually, yeah.
22, yeah. So you're currently drilling 100 meters north of hole 22.
Yeah.
And there's 2 holes still pending assays, or 3 holes?
No, at the lab right now, we have a hole 24, 25, 26, 27 is being processed at the core shack. So we have 3 holes pending at the lab.
I see.
So yeah, this releases 4 holes. So the next one will be the next 4.
And so based upon the drilling to date at Randy's Pit, what is your assessment in terms of where the gold is actually getting stronger? Is it getting stronger to the north?
I think there's equal opportunity on both ends because remember we had our first trench, which was 5 meters at 36.7 grams per ton. Hole 21 in the south, we have 4 meters at 6.5 grams per ton. We understand the plunge northward of these ore shoots now, and because of the trench, we're optimistic that there might be another stack of these lenses opening up along strike to the north. What we're working away now is try to probably do some more fences or do a broader have a broader strategy for investigation. Instead of one hole on each section, we'll probably start doing some fences so we can actually test if there's something in the hanging wall that we're missing to get that width going. So on both ends, and now as the story goes, 5 months ago we had the Randy's pit, 150-meter long saprolite pit, some grab samples from adits and chip samples from mapping. Now we're looking at a corridor of 800-900 meters long with high grade within shared basalts. So within the saprolite, within the rock, the system is consistently there. And it's just the distribution of these shoots that we're trying to understand and unravel, because that's where you have those really exciting grades.
So there's 3 main shear zones that cut through Randy's pit. Is there the potential for more parallel, shear zones to the east and to the west?
I think so. 2 things. So in the near Randy's, I think we draw them a little bit plainer, but they're part of a braided network that's basically a shear corridor. And what we've seen from hole 4 up to some of the recent holes at the Randy's pit, the width can vary between 150 meters up to 20 meters. So you have those parallels, and then you have part of that system you'll have shears in the hang wall, some smaller ones in the footwall, but you also have a bit more distal parallel zones, which in some of our presentation you can see the ridges to the east and to the west. The one to the east is laterite covered system that we see on the ladder and the magnetics, and then the one to the east is a little bit more into the area where you have the intrusion. But there is elevated soil anomalies and elevated topographic features that are maybe it's what are they, 1 or 2.1 or 2K each to both sides. So there's that parallel at that scale.
Very good. That's a great explanation. Rayiez, thank you. I'll give you the final word, Oscar. What can we expect from Sranan over the coming months?
We'll keep growing Randy. We'll start working on Poeketi, and we're going to start working on Lawantino. So there should be lots of activity. There should be a reasonable or a good amount of news coming out. And we're now adding people in country needed to make all that happen. So Rayiez will have to add some geos to his team. There's also, some the further end of the Tapanahony concession, Ennard North, Ennard South. That's also stuff that needs to be investigated. So news flow, and hopefully enough of it. Well, positive news flow.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And you. Bye-bye.